I get it, you don't want to drop cash on a UPS that ends up gathering dust while the power's still humming along. The fear of picking a unit that's either overkill or just underpowered is real, especially when you've got servers, networking gear, or a studio rack that can't afford an unexpected shutdown. That's why I dug into the Vertiv GXT5 5KL630RT3UXLN, read through a handful of technical forums, and tried to tease out the everyday pros and cons before hitting record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the GXT5 series sits in that sweet spot between a compact tower UPS and a full-blown rack mount beast. At 5 kVA it's big enough to keep a modest server rack, a few NAS units, and even a small audio-visual stack alive for the time you need to shut down cleanly or switch to a generator. What makes it feel less like just another UPS is the online double conversion topology. In plain English, the unit constantly conditions the power, so you get a clean, pure sine wave output that's friendly to sensitive electronics. No more worrying about clicking noises on your audio gear or data corruption on your storage arrays when the grid flickers. One of the biggest practical wins is the hot-swappable battery design. In a traditional UPS, you'd have to power down everything, open the chassis, and wrestle with heavy battery packs. Vertiv lets you pull a depleted battery module and slide a fresh one in while the unit stays online, thanks to its internal double conversion architecture. For a small business that can't afford even a few minutes of downtime, that translates directly into peace of mind. I've seen a few IT managers mention how they schedule battery swaps during regular maintenance windows, and the process really is as simple as unlatching a panel and sliding the module out. Remote monitoring is another area where this model leans into the professional side. The GXT5 ships with a network card pre-installed in the 52 configuration, so you get SNMP, Modbus, or simple web-based dashboards without having to buy an add-on. In a real-world setting, that means you can set up email alerts for voltage sag, battery health, or load thresholds, and have those notifications land on your phone or ticketing system. It's the kind of feature that turns a UPS from a passive backup device into an active part of your infrastructure management strategy. Now, let's talk about who actually benefits from this setup. If you run a small server room, a home lab with multiple racks, or a boutique recording studio where you have digital consoles, DAWs, and a handful of monitors, the GXT5's 5 kVA rating gives you enough headroom to protect everything without constantly tripping the unit's load limit. The individual programmable outlets are handy, too. You can assign critical loads to the highest priority sockets and let the less essential gear ride on a lower priority, which helps the UPS stay within its capacity during a longer outage. For IT pros who need to keep network switches, firewalls, and storage arrays humming, the pure sine wave and hot swap capability are genuine value adders. On the flip side, if you're a typical home office user with a single desktop, a monitor, and maybe a router, you're probably overpaying. A smaller, cheaper line interactive UPS would do the job and take up far less space. Speaking of space, the GXT5 is a tower that can also be racked, but it's not exactly lightweight. The chassis weighs in the ballpark of 60 pounds, so you'll need a solid rack or a sturdy floor location, and you'll have to account for the additional depth the unit occupies. It's also not silent. The internal fans kick in under load, which is normal for a unit of this capacity but something to keep in mind if you're placing it in a quiet studio environment. Cost is another factor that often trips buyers up. Vertiv positions this model as a mid-range professional solution, so you're looking at a price tag that reflects its capabilities, especially the hot swap battery system and built-in networking. If you compare it to a similar capacity unit from a consumer-oriented brand, the Vertiv will usually cost more, but you're also paying for the reliability of a double conversion design and the ability to add external battery packs later on. In other words, you're buying scalability. If your power needs grow, you can expand without replacing the whole UPS. A practical weakness that shows up in user discussions is the learning curve around the IntelliSlot management cards. The GXT5 supports a range of optional modules for things like extended battery monitoring or additional communication protocols, and while that flexibility is a strength, it also means you have to plan ahead. If you skip the right slot configuration during the initial purchase, you might need to order extra.